Well, President Biden announced this week that the United States will withdraw all troops from Afghanistan by September 11th, 2021, the 20th anniversary of the Al-Qaeda attacks on New York and Washington. This is America's longest war. It will have gone on just a few months short of 20 years by September. 2,400 U.S. service members have died, 20,000 injured. The estimated monetary cost of the U.S. is in the neighborhood of $2 trillion. Now, the U.S. mission in Afghanistan averaged between 15 and 25,000 troops until 2009, when the violence escalated. And in August of 2010, the U.S. had more than 100,000 troops there. Today, there are between 2,500 and 3,500, and they will start coming home in exactly 2 weeks. And joining me tonight, I'm very happy about this, two men who served in Afghanistan. Darren Schultz, there at the bottom of your screen, a long career in the Navy, including post in Afghanistan. David Ortiz, up and left, served in Afghanistan with the 82nd Combat Aviation Brigade, part of the 82nd Airborne. David also now a Colorado State Representative, who represents part of Arapahoe County in the State House. I am genuinely honored that you all have taken your time to do this tonight. So welcome here. Darren, let's start with you. Initial thoughts when you saw that President Biden said, "That's it, we're getting out of here by September 11th."
My biggest thought is that hopefully we don't have to go back. Hopefully we can leave and be permanently gone. Because we saw a little bit of that where in Iraq, we left and then had to go back. My biggest concern is that we can leave and permanently be gone.
What about you, David?
No, I gotta echo the sentiment of what Darren said. I mean, I'm one of those 20,000 that came back permanently injured. I lived life in a wheelchair because of my service in Afghanistan. And I think Darren has experienced too. We've all lost friends there. And to make that sacrifice worth it, I want to make sure that we leave in a way to where we never experience a 9/11 style attack from that region of the world ever again. So the way in which we leave is going to matter, and making sure that we leave behind a stable government that is able to handle their own issues and their own struggles, and stabilize themselves.
So, I may ask this again at the end of this as well, but I want to ask it up front as well. I know it's broad, but was it worth it? David, I'll start with you.
I mean, anybody that's been in combat, I think, well, I'll just speak for myself. Having been in combat, I'll say violence and destruction, war, it never is truly worth it. Sometimes we do have to do that as a nation and as a people. We've seen it at various times. But if we never have to endure another 9/11 style attack, if we can start seeing further human rights in the way that Afghanistan wants to govern themselves to their people, address to their people, and give in to their people, then I will say it's worth it. Again, that's all dependent on how we leave and how stable the government is when we leave.
How about you, Darren?
For me, I didn't serve in a direct combat role or directly with individuals with or with locals of Afghanistan. Supported a lot of the troops there. And personally, I feel that it was worth it to try and wish it was shorter, but to try and get the people and what caused 9/11 to happen, and to try and decrease the actual amount of terrorism around the world.
Yeah, I mean, if I can jump back in too, I mean, our goals were to get Osama bin Laden, and we did. And we have not had to endure another 9/11 style attack from foreign terrorists since 9/11. So if you look at it that way, by that metric, it was worth it.
President Biden said, and I wouldn't want to misquote him here, so I'll look down at my notes, but that there was only one real task here, ousting Al-Qaeda and making sure that area was never used as a launch pad for an attack on the U.S. And he said we accomplished both those things. I want to get this a little more personal now. And Darren, I'll start with you. What are your most vivid memories? You were there, you did your last tour there, is that correct?
Yes.
What really is your most vivid memories of your time in Afghanistan?
Some of the most vivid memories, kind of the day-to-day that just kind of was the same as the day before, but there's a few things that I never saw while I was on board ship. because while I was in the Navy and on board ship, combat was far removed from us. And there, every once in a while, a pilot, because I fixed airplanes, a pilot would come back and show us a video of what happened or tell us about the mission. Other than that, combat was removed. One of the two vivid memories I sometimes have of my time in Afghanistan is the aspect of, it happened a few times, or every so often in Fob Shank that I was at. Over the loudspeaker, they would call out the mobile blood bank. If you have this type of blood, report to Charlie Med. And I did that a few times as the line moved forward. I never had to give blood, but I've been in line doing that. And the other most prominent memory I've got is the aspect of, at various times, if someone, a service member, had died while on base, whether it was in the medical facilities or for something else, they would play taps. And that was a very moving experience, whereas before that never happened. And what happened was kind of shocked me the very first time, but after that, it was whatever you're doing, you stopped, you stood up, and you held a moment of silence while you played taps.
How powerful that must have been. You heard that multiple times, you said.
Yes.
All right, David, and maybe it's not a fair question to ask of you your most vivid memories, because you had such traumatic injuries over there. But I'll ask it. What are your most traumatic memories about Afghanistan?
I mean, if you leave the day of the crash out, there's a lot of tough memories, but a lot of, I want to be honest, like a lot of camaraderie, joyous moments with the people that you served with. You know, whether it was poker nights when we'd have weather that would keep us grounded. You know, then another image that comes to my head is an MRAP, which is one of the vehicles that, our convoys use, blown up in half with just this charred crater in the ground and blood pooling in there. Or like the starry nights of Afghanistan were some of the most beautiful that I've ever seen, because the light pollution just isn't there. Yes. And we had this tree house that we built between two bunkers that we would play Call of Duty or video games and hang out at as a team. Another memory I have is finding out that one of the members that used to belong to Alpha Troop, Frank Bonacati, passed away in a training accident. He was back in the States. And so somebody had some contraband whiskey and we got to get together and just exchange stories about him and told stories about him. Or, just the pranks that we would pull on each other, or the stupid games we would play when we would trying to pass the time. So there's a lot of vivid memories of intense, moments of combat broken up by just some of the antics or the pranks that you would use to get by with the men and women that you served with.
So this is always tricky for people who did not serve in any form, in any branch or any conflict. What, in either one of you two can answer this first, how do you want people to ask you about your time in not just service, but in a war zone? What's the appropriate question? What do you want them to know? I guess is a better way to put the question. David, I'll start with you.
As far as what I want them to know, for me, what matters.
That's delicate. You don't know how to approach that. You want to talk about it because there's so much appreciation, admiration that for what you did. But I think a lot of us don't always know how to start that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, if they approach me with genuine curiosity and wanting to know what it was like to serve, I will answer those questions and I will be honest and have a conversation with them. If someone approaches me like, "Oh, how many people did you kill?" or something like that, where it almost glorifies conflict. Because here's what I'll say: like, I loved the men and women that I served with, and I loved my mission. I loved the airframe that I flew, but I didn't enjoy combat or conflict. Like I question whether anyone truly does. You know what I mean? There's an intensity that goes with it and a bonding that goes with it. But really, if someone wants to know what it's like, I would like them to start with, why did you serve? What did you feel was so important about serving? Because that kind of opens, I think that to me is the most crucial part that answers why. And my answer would be because of all the amazing things this country has given me. You know, I'm third generation service member on my dad's side. So let's talk about it's a little bit of family tradition, but also people like Darren, the men and women to the left and right of me that were directly to the left and right of me, but also people that I never really got to know. They are family, whether they know it or not, because we had similar experiences in training and in deployment.
So Darren, let me dial that question in a little bit more for you. Why did you serve?
I served a little bit of two reasons. One, I joined right after I graduated, so it was kind of a continuation of life, of what do I do next. And the other aspect is I wanted to serve and sort of pay back the country I live in. There's sometimes I didn't always think about the fact that I'm doing this as a service, and I feel more of it being a service after I got out. The fact that what I did enabled a lot of the free speech and a lot of the things that have gone on. Sometimes I've thought about it actually more after I got out than while I was in.
Yeah, see that. Sure, you get caught up in the day-to-day of life and work there. Did when you were actually there, and I know for you, Darren, you were in like 20 years, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Afghanistan was a small part, but since this is we are commemorating the end of that conflict, let's just focus on your time in Afghanistan. When you were there, did you think about, and how did you think about why you were there, specifically in Afghanistan? You know, up to you after Darren did.
Not all the time did I think about specifically why I was there. There's a few reasons for myself why I was there, because it was kind of one of the last tours and I was trying to evaluate right before I retired. It was hard for me to think about a lot of the other parts of it because, like I said, I was sort of isolated on the FOB. I did fly to a few other locations. I dealt with a postal unit, and I helped sell postage so people could send packages back to the States, which that was nice. And they were always happy to see me. Some of the stuff for getting the mail out was a logistical mess sometimes. But when I would arrive at a smaller location, they were happy because that meant
You're like Santa Claus.
a little bit. I wouldn't bring postage with me. We organized it getting to them, but it helped get things home.
So David, did you have occasion, or you know, maybe that's a luxury to be that contemplative in the middle of war? But when you were in Afghanistan, how did you feel about the reason why you were in Afghanistan?
I mean, it seemed pretty simple to me. It was Afghanistan was one of the hubs of Al Qaeda and kind of where the training of foreign terrorists took place. I mean, they sheltered Osama bin Laden and they wouldn't give him up when we asked. So for that reason, it was very clear. But when I joined, I knew that I could end up in either Afghanistan or Iraq. And I think that's kind of why service to me is kind of sacred, because we don't get to choose where. We swear an oath and we go wherever we're asked to go. So in some ways, it makes us subject to our elected leaders. I mean, it does make us subject to the American people who they decided to vote in. But at the same time, that should keep us not being political, because we serve under both Republican and Democrat presidents. We serve and we go where we're asked to go no matter what. And that's something that I want people to remember, is that we went no matter what. And just to keep that in mind as we're starting to wind things down, and as we're going to start coming home and drawing down the force, I suspect, is kind of result to this, and to remember that, you know, that we set up those veterans that are coming back for success as much as possible on the other side.
What about the Afghan people while you were there? How do you think they considered you, and what do you think they thought of your presence? But and tell me and clarify what year, because it's been so long, what years were you there? Darren, you were in like 12, 13, right on there, is that right?
Yes, 2012 was when I was.
So when were you there, David?
I was there 11, 12.
Okay.
September of 11 was when we got there, yep.
So what was your impression of, and by that time that had been 10 years or so of this war already. So what was your impression of the Afghan people's response to you and your fighting?
Yeah, I'm not going to presume to speak for them or know their mind. I mean, we got to interact. Obviously, we had combat interpreters. We got to interact with Afghanistan National Army. We would supply, we would provide air support and medevac for them if they were injured. And my airframe, we would operate 10, 15 feet from the ground to 150 feet from the ground. So, some of the pilots would drop little packages of like candy and stuff for the kids. So some of the kids would run up, and then some kids would try and throw rocks at us. So, I mean, that tells you right there, sometimes it'd be a mixed bag. I mean, I guess there's no better way to put that, because, some of the individuals that we engaged with, some were diehard believers, like cell leaders, creating IEDs, and that were a part of the movement and were always a part of the movement. And others were in it because that was the only pay they could get, or others because the Taliban would capture their family and coerce them into doing something that they might not have wanted to do. So it's a really complicated conflict, especially when you're dealing with a insurgency fight.
And Darren, I know you said you were somewhat removed from the locals. Did you get an impression while you were there of their response to you? And again, just your impression. I don't want you to feel like you have to get in their minds.
I didn't get a whole lot of impression. There was a little bit where is a big mixed bag of how they felt about us. Some of them benefited about us or benefited from us being there, and were able to sell local wares and items on the fob. And others really did not like the fact that we were in their country.
Sure. You, either one of you, and are there any locals that you had opportunity to have close contact with, and you kind of wonder whatever happened to them?
For me, not really close contact. There's a few times we had locals that we had to interact with, where they fixed the forklifts for our post office, but pretty much it wasn't close contact, sort of talking to them. We were there, kind of talked to them off and on, but monitored them coming to fix the forklifts, and it was pretty much just kind of monitoring them.
Yeah. You ever think about, David, anybody you back home, you go, I wonder whatever happened to so-and-so?
I mean, there was a couple of vendors at the bazaar that I wonder how they're doing. There was one gentleman that would not let me leave every time I went without having some tea with him, even though there was an obvious language barrier there, but just to try and communicate. So, it's, part of the reason that we believe that we're there is to try and do some good, and to try and prevent others from doing bad on our shores. I mean, that's kind of what it's about. But it's, you do wonder about them, and you do hope they're doing well. I mean, one memory I have is flying around, and there's Afghan National Army interacting with some of the civilians, and there was this one kid that couldn't have been older than 15 or 16. And I don't know what preceded this, but we're flying around, and I just see the soldier just put a buttstock right in this kid's face. And I'm like, are we going to call that in? Is there anything we can do about that? And the pilot in command is like, we don't have their frequency. That's not our lane. We can't do anything about that. So, it's just, it's a tough place. And so you feel for them. Yeah.
So as we wrap this up, gentlemen, two questions. Well, I guess just one. How do you think the war in Afghanistan specifically will be remembered? Darren?
I know it's going to be remembered as the longest war, but I hope to an extent it can be remembered ever so slightly as a just interaction. The terrorism happened, we responded. It unfortunately took a lot longer than we would have liked, but we responded. Hopefully it can be remembered. And all the information that comes after the war, which a lot of it is history that re-looks at it, can look at it as just.
Thank you. And David?
think Darren's right on when he says a lot of it's gonna be known in the aftermath. And like when you ask that question, Shannon, my first thought goes to Ken Burns's documentary on the Vietnam War, and kind of the ending that he put on it. Because the thing that struck me at the end was Vietnam American veterans visiting Viet Cong, right? Viet Cong, like visiting their counterparts that they were fighting against. And I'm thinking about having visited there recently myself, and I'm sure there were veterans that were in combat there being like, this place is always going to be garbage. I never want to come back here ever again. And then you see them coming back and enjoying that country now. And one thing I noticed flying around Afghanistan is it has the potential to be an outdoorsman paradise. In fact, when I first came here for rehab and drove into the mountains, my first thought was like, this is a beautiful version of Colorado is a beautiful version of Afghanistan.
Wow.
And the aftermath is really going to tell if they're able to stabilize, create economic prosperity and wealth for themselves and create this booming outdoors paradise. I would love to go back and mono-ski there, So I think a lot of it is going to be in the details of what happens afterwards. And if we have to go back there again, hopefully we won't. And if they're able to create the country for themselves that they want to.
Well, I want to thank you, first of all, both for your service and second of all, for your time tonight. I'm sure there'll be occasions now between now and September 11th, we talk about this, but I just thought it was important to start now that it's kind of hard, I think, for all of us to get our heads around that, this war that seemed ever present, it was just kind of part of our daily lives, is actually looks like it's going to come to an end. So thank you all again very much and for your candor. And it was great to meet you too. So after COVID, the first round's on me. How about?
Sounds good, Shannon. We'll take you up on that.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Good night.